On this day, a very important day for all Americans, it not be a day off, but a day on. And we figure out ways that we can carry out the message and legacy and mission of Dr. King. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once lived in our state of Illinois in 1966. I was in high school back then, and he moved to Chicago. And he talked about bringing down the walls of segregation and exclusion. And those words, I think, are always something we should take to heart, that we don't want anyone excluded in our society. We want everybody in and nobody left out. And I think it's so important that our institutions of higher education that are just so excellent in Illinois, one of our great virtues, our assets in Illinois, is that we have a network of public and private institutions of higher education that are second to none on planet Earth. And we're very proud of each and every one of you, and we want to thank you for joining us today. And that's, as Derek just said, our state, when we passed a public works bill several years ago, right after I became governor, we wanted to make sure we were investing not only in our public universities and our community colleges, but also investing in our private institutions of higher learning. And I have been across Illinois to a number of institutions where we're very proud that our investments in capital in your particular institution are really making that university of yours or your community or of your college that much better a place. And we want to continue to make those investments. At the same time, I think it is a good time for all of us to understand how important it is to have diversity and inclusion in everything we do, both public and private in Illinois. Our state of Illinois, for example, we're going to be dedicating in a very short time on February 8th a bridge across the Mississippi River from East St. Louis, where I used to live, to St. Louis. It's going to be called the Stan Musial Veterans Memorial Bridge. And we're going to be there in the sort of the shadow of the arch that leads to the west of our country. And we had to build a bridge. And the bridges cost a lot of money, I'll guarantee you that, $700 million or something like that. But in building that bridge, we were able to make sure that those who built the bridge, about 24% of them were minority citizens who worked on the bridge itself. And that was a great, great progress for us in minority employment. At the same time, we wanted the contracting and the services related to that to also be reaching out to the community. And about 18 or 19% of those who participated got contracts, minority contracts, that were very important in getting the job done on time and on budget. And I think that that should be, I think, a lesson to all of us, that if we stretch, if we explore, if we examine, we can find men and women in our state that have the ability to do important work for important institutions like our colleges and universities.
As we reflect on the importance of the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King, let us also be celebratory in the progress that we have accomplished as a culture, as a people, and as a nation. By no means am I saying that we have completely overcome, but through the efforts of Governor Quinn, President Middleton, along with you all, the other Illinois University presidents and staff and executives, I do stand on the strength that we are standing in a place of promise, overcoming through diversity in education. I believe that diversity in education extends beyond presidents and provosts, beyond labs and textbooks, beyond students and schedules, but that the diversity that we seek can only be achieved through interaction, through communication, and through understanding. Understanding that we may seem to be different people, but we are all individuals that are worthy of education. We are all worthy of the possibilities of a greater promise of tomorrow. And that is what the diversity in education affords us. It affords us that opportunity to become greater. It affords us the opportunity to establish legacies as individuals for our families and for our country. We are all on the same path towards success. We just may have to take a different road or a different avenue to get there. We must always be open to learning the experiences of others in order to fully have a sense of our own struggles. So I just want to thank you guys for the opportunity to speak before you. I'm excited about what you all do. I look forward to possibly one day fighting and going down this path with you all, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
McDonald's, we represent 1.8 million employees, and that's a lot of people, right? 1.8 million. And our company, we have 34,000 restaurants throughout the globe, and we serve actually 69 million customers a day. A lot of hamburgers, right? Cheeseburgers, but don't forget there's salads and oatmeal and all the other great things in there. 14,000 of our restaurants are located here in the U.S., and we are proud of all the great things that happen in the U.S. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. But Dr. Massey, as you look at this slide, there's no place to add another position, right? So I have this ladder here, starting out at McDonald's, as you heard earlier, as an administrative assistant in the corporate legal department. And like so many others, I came to McDonald's saying, oh, it's a good job. I'll work there until I get a real job. Because actually, I was at Roosevelt University trying to complete my degree and said, it's okay, it'll get me through until I finish at Roosevelt, and then I'll go get a real job. So here I am, 38 years later, February 1st, with a real job, and the fact that my CEO asked me to take on another department, which is global community engagement, just last year, I reminded him, no more. You can't add another job because there's no more room on the page. So that's my job. Today is leading the global diversity and inclusion team, and now leading the community engagement team. And so the work for me has been, as you can see, personally rewarding, but for me professionally, it's what I believe, but I also believe it personally. I believe in the work that I do. And because we've always had such terrific support from the top down, I feel absolutely thrilled and honored to be in that position. So, Governor, I'm going to share our story with you and the visitors here, because I think it's important to understand how we got here, because we weren't always here. It's been an evolution. And fortunately for us, we've had some terrific people help us with this evolution, on this journey. And it is clearly a journey. It's not a destination that we will ever meet. It's a journey. And I have been so proud to be a part of this journey along the way. So at McDonald's, diversity and inclusion is everybody's business. And what I'm going to share with you today is really illustrate for you how it's everybody's business at McDonald's. And so it's about, for us, moving from awareness to action. You know, early on, we were making people aware of what diversity was, and that was part of the evolution. But today, it's more about action. What are we really doing to make a difference? And how we look at others' strengths and respecting and valuing everyone, as we say, on both sides of the counter. You as customers, as well as the crew people that work within our restaurants. Our vision is very simple. It's about creating an environment where everybody feel that they can give their best. We want everyone that walks in the door to understand and feel that they can contribute their best, regardless of their difference. Our mission is to champion a cultural, intelligent mindset that motivate leaders to hold themselves accountable, because it's about leaders holding themselves accountable to value and respect everyone on both sides of the counter, and galvanize diverse external partners. We work externally to make sure that we are strategically looking at the partners that we work with. And also for me, the most important thing here for me as it relates to our mission is to have the courage to be in the presence of discomfort that oftentimes results from an inclusive environment. And we spend a lot of time making sure that people feel comfortable. And sometimes we have to make them feel uncomfortable to get them there. And that's really what it's all about. But you have to have courage to do that. And if you have that courage, you will speak up. And I often tell people I hold them responsible for making sure that they speak up when they see something is wrong. If they hear someone say something inappropriate, every employee should speak up and make sure that they are, holding people accountable for it. So there are three global success factors I think that has helped us along the way. One is senior leadership commitment and accountability. Two, our diversity and inclusion education, and our employee business networks. So I'm going to talk about that. So we think about senior leadership accountability. One of the things that I'm most proud of is that Don holds everybody accountable along with our board of directors. So I'm glad Dr. Massey is here because he's a big part of what we do in terms of ensuring that our leaders are held accountable for diversity in all areas of the business, whether it's on the operations side with our operators, whether it's our employees or our suppliers. Our board is very involved in diversity in terms of what we are doing, where we are. Dr. Massey measures that. He leads a committee that helps us make sure we're doing the right thing. And he and John Rogers, I just love them dearly because sometimes I can walk in the boardroom and I know they're going to ask all the tough questions, and it makes my job easier. And so for you, Dr. Massey, I want to say thank you to you for all that you do for us as a board member, and also to John Rogers, because you two make it happen for me. But it's because of Don Thompson and Tim Fenton, our COO. They hold everyone accountable. It starts at the top. So without senior leadership accountability, we would not be where we are. And fortunate for us, we've always had senior leaders who got it. You know, a lot of work went in early on, and our senior leaders really got it. So it has to start from the top down. If the senior leadership doesn't get it, it's very difficult to do the kind of work that we do as chief diversity officers. The second thing is education. So our diversity and inclusion education started really early. I would tell you back in the late 70s. And it all started with our CEO that recently passed, Fred Turner. You may have heard that name. But Fred Turner worked shoulder to shoulder with Ray Kroc. And in the mid-70s, Fred Turner's daughters came home and they were complaining about how they were treated on their jobs. So Fred called a group of women in a conference room and he wanted to know, is this happening to my women? And the answer was yes. And he said, fix it. I want it fixed. And because of Fred Turner, in the mid-70s, we started educating our people around the U.S. on diversity education. And this has been consistent ever since. And I think that diversity education has played a critical role, and it's been ongoing. It's not a stop-and-go kind of thing. Fortunately, it's been ongoing, so people know you have to go to your diversity workshops. To the extent that Fred Turner, I remember early on, when some of our regional managers decided they didn't want to go to one of his workshops, Fred literally picked up the phone and said, I heard you're not attending my workshop. And that was the end of that. He said, I'll be in the next class. So it was that kind of engagement from the top down that Fred Turner believed in this, and he wanted this to happen. So education has been a major part of all the work that we do. The third global success factors has to do with our employee business networks. We know that our employees live in the communities where we do business. And it's so important for our employees to be engaged, to participate. So early on, we created employee networks. And today, we have 5 business networks, and we have about 4 resource groups. But our employee business networks are really business organizations. They come to us with ideas about the business. They support the business goals. In fact, they don't operate unless they support some of our business goals. And we're very proud of the different employee business networks as listed here. So in 2009, I decided I wanted to document the story of this evolution. So I went to our then CEO, Jim Skinner, and said, I think we have a story to tell, and we haven't told the story. And he said, well, do what you need to do. So I then wrote the book, and It's all about what happened to us in 1957 to 2009. And what we know in the book, it's really about real things that happened. Everything isn't positive in the book. We talk about the good times and the bad times as McDonald's was evolving around this whole evolution of diversity. The other thing we're very proud of is those at McDonald's who started as crew. So 82% of our restaurant management teams, those individuals that lead our restaurants, started as crew. And 63% of our regional vice presidents literally started as crew at the counter. And today, they're running regions like Florida, like Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, et cetera. And we're very proud of the fact that they can say they started as crew, and today they're doing some phenomenal things with us. 89% of our restaurants in the U.S. are franchised. So the majority of our restaurants are franchised, but 45% of those restaurants in the U.S. are owned and operated by women and people of color. And that, again, has been something we've worked on for a number of years. When we look at supplier diversity, $7.9 billion is spent on products from businesses owned by women and people of color. And that's about 72% of our supplier diversity dollars when it comes to food, paper, and equipment in our restaurants that is spent with women and people of color. And we're very proud of that as well. So when we talk about training, learning, development, education, and mentoring, that has been ongoing. Hamburger universities, we have 7 in different locations around the globe. And I want to thank President Middleton. He and some of our board members visited one of our hamburger universities, I think in Beijing. And we're proud of these hamburger universities in terms of the areas of the world that they're located, and they do some phenomenal work there. As you can see here, our restaurant supervisors and managers have learned English under the arches. We have a program specifically for those Latinos who don't speak English but work in our restaurant. So we are actually teaching them how to speak English under the arches. So we're very proud of that program, as well as our MCD mentoring program. So I know Dr. King said the function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. Intelligence plus character, that is the goal of education. And we feel really good about it because, again, from the crew room to the boardroom, we are constantly helping our employees, whether they're in the crew room or in the boardroom. And we're very proud of the diversity that exists within McDonald's from the crew room to the boardroom. So with that, I will close and answer any questions you have later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pat. Next, I will introduce Elizabeth Ortiz, who joined DePaul University in 2002 and is currently the Vice President of Institutional Diversity and Equity. Prior to her work at DePaul, she was the Director of Affirmative Action, Diversity, and Employee Relations at Northern Illinois University. Her college and university experience spans more than 20 years in both the public and private sector, including the Chicago Community College system. She has worked on diversity initiatives in several areas, including recruitment, retention, training, programming, and climate issues for diverse students, faculty, and staff. She currently serves on the board of Diversifying Our Faculty in Illinois, and actually now is chair. I enjoy working with her there, and she's treasurer of the National Association of Diversity Officers in Higher Education, as well as serves on the Illinois African American and Latino Higher Education Alliance. She's also the past president of the Illinois Latino Council on Higher Education. And we just learned that later this week she'll be honored by the Illinois Human Rights Commission and receive the Martin Luther King Award for Educational Change.
What's interesting is that some of the things that work in corporate America can work in higher education. And so I really think that as we do our work, we have to transcend it. We know it's about our students, and we know it's about our student success. But we have to look at all of those other things, right? We have to look at our faculty, the diversity of our faculty, the diversity of our staff. We have to look at our vendor programs and see how do we become, in its totality, a higher education institution that represents all of society. So I wanted to preface my remarks with that. One of the things I want to talk about to Paul, because it's my employer, right? That's why I'm here today. But we do have almost 25,000 students. A third of our students are first-generation, Chicago-based, and high-need diverse students. Looking at our freshman class, 33% of our freshman class were first-generation students, and 35% were students of color. And so we're educating students that we know are going to come to us with special needs. We realized that in order to do diversity, that we had to be strategic. And so I want to tell you today that as you do your diversity work, it has to be intentional. The work that we do has to be planned for. And so as part of that process, it was part of our Vision 2012, which was Goal 3, and it said DePaul would be a model of diversity. We'd be good at it, but we wanted to be the best in higher education. And so we really focused a lot of our attention on recruitment, which I'll talk about today. And then when we went to Vision 2018, we said, okay, we've reached certain milestones, but now what about retention? What about engagement? What about what Pat talked about, that people show up, whether it's to the workplace or to the classroom, where they feel truly validated and valued and celebrated? And so we shifted our focus there. We also know to be a leader at the forefront that resources needed to be committed, that all of our practices and policies had to be aligned to realize our goals, and we really our leadership had to reflect those values. Also, our universities are complex organizations. If you think the diversity officer is responsible for all of that happens around diversity, it's not. If we had a conversation today, our enrollment management, right, is doing student diversity. Human resources is doing staff diversity. Academic affairs is doing faculty diversity. And so we all really have to be speaking the same language, having the same tools to reach our goals. Lastly, I do think that it really has to be part of our mission and really has to embrace who we are. As I look at this work, I think this is not just a business imperative. We really want to, as we educate our students, truly prepare them for the world in which they live, a truly multicultural, global world. And they really are going to be, right, the citizens of Illinois and beyond. And they're really going to be the engine that drives our state. Let's see if I can get to this. I really want to talk to this slide, and I'm just going to leave it here. I have about 50 slides. Don't worry, we won't be here for hours. But I do think this is the essence of what I want to talk about. The first thing I want to talk about, and Pat hit on it, is leadership and policy advocacy. As presidents and executives in higher education, you have a tremendous bully pulpit to speak about what's important regarding diversity and inclusion. I just wanted to talk a little bit about what we're doing and hoping to share that these best practices will help you. But many of you know our president, Father Dennis Holtschneider, and he's an advocate spokesperson for the DREAM Act on the state and national level. He really goes out there. He brought it to the Catholic Conference of Bishops. And one of the things that we did early on is we got together as a university community with everyone from admissions to financial aid to university ministry, and we crafted this DREAM Act. We said instead of this DREAM Guide for our students, instead of us all working separately, let's work together to make this the best experience for our students. Not only that, we had students on this work as well. And so our student government are now active advocates for the DREAM Act. And we also worked with the governor's office, so thank you, Governor Quinn, for that. But also, the president gives many of his executives release time, as was mentioned. I have been part of the Performance Funding Committee, a chair of diversifying our faculty in Illinois. We realize that it's not just what DePaul does, it's what we do to impact the higher education community on the state and national level that's really going to make a difference. When we talk about if we cut funding off here, are we talking about that we're going to raise ACT scores or SAT scores? Are we talking about raising GPA scores? And so it's really important as we move forward to have this dialogue and what it means and what the impact will be for students, diverse students. I think what I want to go to next then is accountability. So then how do we hold ourselves accountable? How do we report? How do we track? How do we say, are we reaching our goals? You know, I think here's one place where we have to have bold vision. We have to say, you know, and sometimes it's scary, right, to say we will. We did this law, which I'll get to later. We will increase student of color graduation rates by 5% in the next 5 years. And I'll tell you how we did that in a minute. But it was through bold actions. And I think we really do have to set those benchmarks and hold ourselves accountable. One of the things that we're doing now is we're actually also making this part of the performance evaluation for faculty and staff. We're in the process of this, and especially for chairs and the administration, management, deans, vice presidents. We really have to say, you're accountable for fiscal responsibility, you're accountable for reaching your goals, but how about accountable for these diversity goals? In recruitment, we have done so much in this area. Like I said, I can speak probably for the next 2 hours, and I would not touch upon all of it. But I just want to talk about 2 things that I think have really made a significant difference for DePaul. One of the first things we did is the first-year academic success program. Now, many of our students were coming in with not having the preparatory math and English scores that they needed to place into college-level classes. And so what we did, and we knew MAP was a challenge, right, and we knew our students were running out of financial aid, is that we are now front-loading these classes, offering them in the summer so students do not have to pay for these courses. It's called the FIAS program, First Year Academic Success Program. If you go around DePaul, that's how they say. And that has really made a difference for our students, because now instead of using MAP dollars towards this, right, this is something that they do beforehand. The other thing that we've done is that we created a Center for Access and Attainment. And Brian Spittle, are you here? Brian Spittle is the Associate Vice President over that program. There's so many good things coming out of there. Like I said, I could take hours talking about it. The Illinois Baccalaureate School Partnership, the Community College Partnership, the CPS Partnership. But again, we committed resources, and how do we go out and get the students that we are seeking? The other thing that I think is really for us was kind of a sea change, was we became a test optional university. Now we are piloting that program, and it began in 2012. But we said the only thing that the SAT and the SAT show us is social economic status, right? Where are you on that line? And so we said a student's ability to succeed could be demonstrated in an essay, could be demonstrated by GPA, and that is, you know, how we're moving forward. And again, if you would like more information, please talk to Brian. We are piloting this. We have to see how it's doing. But again, I think this shows our commitment to increasing our diversity at DePaul. And the other thing I really want to talk about is we are really committed a lot of resources to academic advising. And so all of our students said when we did our survey, they should, you know, really advising is an issue. And so we're coming up with this kind of one-stop shop, not for advising, but also for student help, for tutoring, these study jams. And we really think that all of these efforts are making a difference. So much so that then we can get into retention, because then we say, how do we engage our students? We started through the Office of Multicultural Student Success, our Men of Color initiative, and so many other initiatives really focused at the student. In 2003, we had I'm going to get this statistic right here. We had a 53% rate for African American students. And in 2011, we moved that bar to 63%. So I think you could see, if you're committed and you really focus on what's important to your institution and the state goals and the nation's goals, we can move the bar when it comes to retention. The last thing I want to talk about is engagement and retention around faculty and staff, and what we've done that. Because we didn't just look at students. We said, what can we do then to diversify our staff and faculty? So one thing I can tell you is our staff is 31% diverse. Our faculty is 16% diverse, so we have a long way to go when it comes to faculty. However, we are at the state and national benchmarks when it comes to faculty diversity. But again, we created the President's Diversity Council, and we brought faculty and staff across disciplines to the table and said, what can we do to recruit top talented faculty of color? And so we came up with a faculty search guide, we came up with best practices, we came up with a whole kind of training program that goes out and trains chairs on how to recruit faculty diversity. That has also yielded results for us, but we didn't stop there. We said, okay, now we got to look at faculty mentoring. And so we're in the process. We do have the National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity. We have an online mentoring program, and we're piloting mentoring programs throughout the colleges, and we've created diversity advocates so that at each college, a faculty member of color has someone that they can go to, an ear, that reports, that also serves in the President's Diversity Council, so that it's all connected. Of course, I have to have compliance there. We make sure to follow all city, state, and federal mandates. And last, education and training. So we really have pulled out, and I have brought some of this for you here. We have created a cultural competency program for all of our employees. It is not mandatory yet, but we're thinking of moving there. It's an 18-hour certificate program. And then we have developed the President's Signature Series, which we actually committed $80,000 to the task, that any faculty member, staff member can come up with a program, and it is reviewed and funded through our office. So these are just some of the things that we have done to increase diversity at DePaul. I'll be honest, today we're talking about vendor programs and what we can do for minority and female business enterprises. We know we have a long way to go to achieve our goals. This is kind of the last thing that we're looking at in our strategic plan. We plan to be aggressive with it. We have diversity as one of the criteria for selection. I am happy to say, of the spend that we have at DePaul University, 50% of our dollars stay in the state of Illinois, and we would like to increase that to women and minority business enterprise. So with the time I have, I hope that answered some of your questions, and I hope to be here to answer more.
Thank you, Liz. Next, I will introduce our third panelist. Ellen Blair-Chube is Vice President and Chief of Staff to John Rogers, Chairman and CEO of Ariel Investments. In this capacity, she is responsible for setting his agenda, providing strategic and operational support, and translating his short and long-term vision into actionable strategies for his leadership team. She acts as his chief advisor on political and public policy issues, as well as leads all of his special projects, including the firm's national work on financial literacy and minority business.
Thank you for having me. I first want to say I'm not John Rogers, as you can see, but he sends his regrets for not being here. He's dealing with a family emergency, but he deeply wanted to be here, as this is one of his favorite events, and I must commend and recognize Governor Quinn for your leadership in this area. When you held the forum last year, we were just so very excited and have talked about it with political leaders and universities and nonprofits across the country, demonstrating your leadership and just all of the fantastic things that are happening here in Chicago and Illinois. So thank you again. So I guess I would say the steps that the institutions here in the audience can take in terms of professional services spend is to use the University of Chicago as model. Clearly, John is very passionate about the work that he's done there with President Zimmer and Nadia and Nim, as well as the leadership that the governor has held, has demonstrated in putting together that program. One of the things that we like particularly about that program is that they're focusing, one, on professional services, which we think is deeply important. These are the parts of our economy that are growing, where there are sizable margins and where real wealth can be generated, which we think is important for the minority business community. So we encourage your institutions to, one, track your spending by category. Take a look at what you're spending money on and who you're spending it with. And that could probably shine some light on where you might be able to find quality and outstanding minority and women businesses, as the University of Chicago has. I also encourage you to get that buy-in from the top that Nadia referenced in the video. It's deeply important that you have the leadership of the presidents, of your senior executives, of particular trustees that can shepherd a program like this along. The University of Chicago has been doing this for about 5 years now, but they've moved mountains, we think, and have concrete success stories in the area of professional services. So those are two key things I think that are deeply important in shepherding these issues along.
Thank you. And I have one more question. Pat, I'll direct it to you, but feel free to answer to the others as well. You talked a lot about education, and Alan and Liz, you also talked about leadership. So obviously, diversity and inclusion is so important at all of your institutions. Why is it so important to your CEO? How did you get there? Tell us a little bit more about that, Pat.
Well, first of all, Don Thompson, as well as past CEOs, recognize that we have a lot of young people that work for us in our restaurants as well as our offices. And education, we know, is important. He knows it's important. He supports it and encourages people to go back to school if they don't have a degree, or, you know, we have a sabbatical program that allows people to do studying as well. But education for us, you know, in many cases is how we exist. And when I think about diversity education, I mean, when I think about the restaurants and the diversity of our customers, it's important for us to educate our people about our customers and how diverse our customers are. So as far as making sure that we are educating everyone on both sides of the counter, as I mentioned earlier, we educate our employees about the value of diversity so that they, in turn, can respect our customers. And we just spend a lot of time on that because of our customer base and giving back to the communities that we serve. And obviously, it's critical for Don. It's one of his priorities to make sure that we continue diversity education and help people as they move along in their careers get the kind of education that they need and want.
Well, I believe that my university president came with a commitment to diversity, being who he is and what he's done. But what I can say is the difference that a university leader can make when they're truly committed. One of the things, and many of you might sympathize with this, I was a diversity officer, but I was an office of one. And after he got there, there's now 6 of us in the office. There's money, there's resources that are allocated to it. He ensured that it was part of our strategic plan. And throughout the university, it's not just my office that he invested in. He invested in student affairs, in academic affairs, and throughout the university to make sure that we met our strategic diversity goals. And I really do think that comes with leadership, that comes with vision, and I would assume so many of the leaders in this room have that same commitment. So thank you.
Thank you. Who has the next question?
Hi, Marnell Alexis, McCormick College president. About a year ago, the state identified first generation and added that to the list of underrepresented groups. And you mentioned you have 35%, Elizabeth, 35% students of color. I'm interested in learning a little bit more about what you're doing with the first generation students and what percentage of your students of color are first generation.
I don't have that data point. I do know that 35% of our students are diverse, 33% are first gen. Now, we can't assume that every student of color that comes through our doors is first generation. Brian, do you have that data point?
It varies a little bit by different groups. So for default, but for Latino students, it's about 60%, 70% of first generation. African Americans, a little less than that. For us, more like 50, 55, something like that.
One thing I will say is much of our dollars were focused then on that first generation, not first generation, first year experience. So what we found is a student who completes, we're a quarter system, who completes 48 hours and achieves a 2.50 will be retained at an over 92% rate, but they are also on track for a 6-year graduation. And so through our Office of Multicultural Student Success, We started the Men of Color initiative, and Aaron, are you here? Aaron Baum? We have Aaron Baum, who works in the Male of Color initiative and was our keynote speaker this morning at MLK. We did the Women Empowered. We have the STARS mentoring program, which we have sophomore students mentoring freshman students. And then again, enhance advising, this one-stop study center, all of these things that we're doing to focus on this first year experience to enhance student success. Because what happens is if they're successful that first year, right, it snowballs. But if they're also, if they have a bad first quarter, first year, it really also snowballs and they really never quite recover.
I don't know if the new person is supposed to ask a question or not, but I'm Jim Applegate, the incoming Executive Director for the Illinois Board of Higher Education. You guys have identified all these best practices that we know work, and with really good results. And in my previous job, I spent tens of millions of dollars with the foundation funding lots more programs that did work. My question, I guess, though, is despite all of this, it seems to remain, at least in the higher education sector, sort of 1,000 random acts of excellence. That is, when we look at the overall data for Illinois, or certainly for the country, things aren't going the right direction. I mean, the 2010 census showed us that 4 out of 5 wealthy 24-year-olds have a 4-year college degree. Only 1 out of 10 low-income students do. The gaps that we're talking about here have not gotten that much better anywhere. So the issue for me through all these years has been scale and sustainability. And you've talked some about how that's been sustained had to grow at McDonald's. But I guess your thoughts, any of your thoughts, on how do we, in general, but particularly in higher education, how do we address this issue of scaling this up and making it sustainable so that it becomes part of the water supply and not a bunch of wonderful stories that we do case studies on of individual institutions or individual corporations that have done this? How do we get this out there so we're really moving the dial in a big way?
Right. So I'll start, but one of the things I think that worked effectively for us, and again, it's been an evolution and it continues, so I'm not here to tell you that everything's perfect at McDonald's. But what I will tell you is that over the years, we created this environment, and it started at the top. You know, we always had CEOs that got it, so that was a plus for us. So as leaders, it starts at the top in modeling the behavior that you want to see happen throughout the organization or throughout your school. And I think the fact that the CEOs got it, and then they held everybody accountable. So one of the things I always say, diversity isn't my job, and I forgot to introduce my peer over here, Christina Alfaro's job. It's not our job to make it happen. It's everybody's job within McDonald's system. So if it's marketing, then marketing owns multicultural marketing. If it's HR, HR owns diversity recruitment and hiring and talent management and all of that. Franchising owns franchising diversity. Everybody owns their piece of it. So over the years, we've created this model where everybody owns their piece of diversity. And we're there. We provide resources to them. We support them, provide tools to them, with them to help them grow whatever their area is, but they own it. And I think when we finally got to that point to say, you know what, diversity is not, and this is nothing to do with HR in a bad way, but diversity shouldn't be in HR. HR owns diversity, recruitment, and all the HR policies, the stuff around diversity. You know, so we're over here. We're in global corporate social responsibility. That's where we are. And everyone now gets it. They know, they own it. And so my CEO and our COO holds them accountable for franchising, for marketing, for supplier diversity. They own it. And I think over the years we've evolved there. And so they get it, and they work hard on it because they are held accountable, so it rolls back up to the CEO. So I guess, and I don't know that it can work like that in an institution because I've never worked in an institution, but I think some level of that where the accountability piece is clear, to those who work with you and make sure that they own their piece of it and hold them accountable. But I think accountability is the key.
You know, I sit on about 6 policy boards, and it's not because I'm looking for extra work. It's really because I do think, whether it's DFI and the performance funding, is that we really have to connect the dots. And I think so many times we have these conversations, but we don't have them necessarily together. And so many times policy is not created with the community. Now, I'm not speaking on behalf of DePaul. Unfortunately, right now I'm speaking as a community advocate and part of the boards that I sit on, whether it's Illinois Latino Council on Higher Education or the Illinois African American and Latino Higher Education Alliance, is when I sit around these policy tables, I don't always see the people that it affects. I mean, you're right, we know what works. I think the other thing is to connect between that accountability that Pat's working. And I think the other thing is we all have to work together. I always say, I mean, these are the things that keep me up at night. I've been in higher education for 30 years. I was told that I would never make it, and I did. I was told by my high school counselor in 1976, you are not college material, you should become a secretary. And yet, when I go to different schools like Aurora or Bowen High School, and I talk to students, some students are, Canelan High School, when I worked at Northern, my daughters went there. They try to put them in ESL classes when they're 4th generation United States citizen and don't speak a word of Spanish. I think we really do, as a society, have to address how we track students, where we send students, how we say who can make it and who can't, and issues of poverty and segregation, just what we've been talking about with Martin Luther King. If together we can come together, I think that's why the Gates Foundation, the Lumina Foundation, because our students, when I say our students of color start with such obstacles to overcome, that really it is about financial resources and then understanding the system of higher education. And they start with such deficiencies, not because they're not bright, not because they don't have desire, but because they just don't understand the system and come with that discretionary wealth that student that you talked about who gets a bachelor's degree.
I see Chris had a question back here.
Thank you. My name is Chris Wiseman. I'm the president of St. Xavier University on Chicago's far south side. As I look around this room, I think many of my colleagues are already at, and indeed some have surpassed, the thresholds that you're talking about. My population, 68% first generation. Minority, 42%. I have a 51% Pell population, and I have a 49% MAP population. I'd like to talk about the question of sustainability. For me, it's not a question of access. I am already doing access. It is a question of sustainability. My Pell population, average family income, maybe $23,000 a year. And as I look at my colleagues here, the issue for us is sustainability. How do we make this model work? And I guess my question is directed to our colleagues in business. How do we, the institutions who are already doing that, how do we attract the resources from industry to make this mission sustainable? It's one thing, you know, to call together the flagship institutions and the big foundations and business to support the flagship institutions. It's another thing to call them together to support those of us who are making it happen for first generation and minority populations. Any advice you have would be greatly appreciated.
Right, and I guess, again, not understanding all the processes as it relates to the education side. What worked for me, what worked for us over the years is utilizing our employees to help us with that. As I said earlier, many of our employees are located in the communities where we do business. So we use them as a resource. And they help us. They literally come to us with ideas and suggestions about the kinds of things that we can do to make it better for our employees. You know, whether they are Latino, African American women, our networks are very strong. And we have the diversity education workshops that we make available. those are the kinds of things that keep our employees there. Those are the kinds of things that make our employees, you know, want to stay with us because they feel a part of the system. They feel a part of it. So as we continue, and some people say, well, why do you have these diversity workshops today? You don't need them. Things have changed. Well, things have changed, but not that much. And I think one of the things that keep our employees there is they love going to those employee business network meetings. That's a motivator for them. They love, you know, participating in diversity education workshops. That motivates them. So those are the kinds of things that have been consistently working well for us. And Don Thompson will be the first to tell you that he went through a Black career development workshop 20 years ago. And that is why he stayed at McDonald's, because his experience in a, quote, Black career development, when he kind of had one foot in and one foot out the door, that is what made him stay. So those kinds of initiatives where some people think are not important, they are important. And I will tell you what the kinds of things you can do to help motivate your employees, your students. I think those kinds of activities are the kinds of things that will keep them there. I mean, that's what has worked for us. The women love coming to work at McDonald's because they enjoy participating in our women's leadership network. They get involved in community activities. They get involved in activities within McDonald's. And those are the kinds of drivers that help them feel good about coming to work every day. So, you know, we're going to continue to do those things until they don't work anymore. And right now, they all continue to work well for us. Okay?
I would just to piggyback on that, I think it's also important, and you can't underestimate the effectiveness of having true Pied Pipers, if you will. So clearly, employee student satisfaction is, you know, it's key. But to have those, you know, outgoing and outstanding students within those groups that can serve as that voice to the outside really is, I think it's impactful for us, for those that are on the receiving end of those stories. So, Howard, I'm sorry, I forgot your name for a second, but the Howards of the world that can go out and speak for the universities, those Pied Pipers are, don't underestimate those as well.
Senator.
I want to testify for a second. First of all, about John Rogers. I've known John since I was 3 years old. Grew up across the street from him, so I've learned diversity from the best. And one of the things John is good for is cutting to the chase. So I'll try to do so. When you, I think we're having a couple of conversations here. We're talking about diversity as higher education institutions and with regards to students that are admitted and things of that nature. And there's another aspect, and I really always believe that when somebody demonstrates their true commitment is when they spend their money and how they spend their money. And so when you evaluate your success with regards to your commitment to diversity, also be sure to have to check your procurement successes with regards to diversity. It's not solely how many students of color you have coming in spending money at your institution. It's what are you doing on the other end, because it has a real residual effect upon how many future students there will be able to be coming to higher education institutions, because as we all know, as I'm about to confront in a couple of years, the cost of higher education for the second time around is rising. And McDonald's, you know, my first job out of college was with a company called Persico that buys the packaging for McDonald's. And I learned about McDonald's commitment to diversity way back in the mid-'80s when I was working at Persico. And there are a couple of stories that are worthy of telling. One is the story of quality crouton. When McDonald's was going into the salad business, they looked at it as an opportunity to embrace a minority supplier. And so they essentially helped develop a minority supplier with regards to croutons. I used to do quality auditing, so I went to manufacturing facilities. There was a garbage can liner company in the city of Newark, New Jersey, that was minority owned and had minority employees. And so when we talk about what we can do that has its effect, both on feeding students, you have to look at how you spend your dollars. Ariel, John doesn't just talk the talk. John is in the community and helped develop Ariel Academy that is in the community developing future John Rogers, teaching them about the markets at first grade. Those are the types of residual, if you develop minority-owned companies, you develop corporate citizens that are able to reinvest into the community. So,
thank you.
Could I just add on to that? Because I thank you for that, because one of the things that our founder, Ray Kroc, said that, we have 3 legs of a stool as part of our business. And at any point, if one of those legs are weak, then the company will not succeed. And that's our suppliers, our franchisees, and our employees. And so the supplier piece is very critical to the success of our company, the success of our company. So early on, the Prosecco's and others were there, but McDonald's made a concerted effort to make sure that we brought in women and minority suppliers. It didn't just happen. We created, an initiative to make that happen, and that's why 72% of our supplier dollars today are with women and minorities. And so, and that was a link that was pretty weak at one time, but a plan was put together, and so it happened, and it was a commitment again from the top. So it wasn't just, the employee side working on the employees, but it was the franchisee side making sure we had women and people of color who were franchising our restaurants around the world and around the U.S. in particular. And so it was a concerted effort that was made to make that happen. And that it goes back to people owning their piece of diversity, whether you're in franchising, whether you're in supplier diversity, or whether you are on the people side in HR. But it's owning it and making sure people own it and make it happen.
I think we have time for a couple more questions. I saw a couple hands over here.
My name is Wasi Khan. I'm the founding president of East West University, which is in the 34th year. There are only 2 African American universities. Ours is Independent University and then Chicago State. My question is for Ms. Harris. Our great country is suffering from strange kind of ideological problems. Taxes are being cut, federal and state budgets are being cut, and charitable giving from big corporations is what we need. So could you kindly tell us what percentage of the net profits of McDonald's are assigned for charitable giving for higher education?
I actually can't tell you that because I don't know that. I'm sorry, I can't answer that. But one of the things, and I know that Don is very serious about, is giving back to the community. He asked me to lead the Global Community Engagement Department. And when he became CEO last year, he created this department to ensure that we were doing the right thing in terms of giving back to the community. So I'm very proud of that. Very proud that he asked me to do that. But I do know through our Ronald McDonald House Charities, we have scholarships that we offer youth with different scholarship programs. But I cannot say to you, and I won't even attempt to tell you what that percentage is that we give to higher education. Mm-hmm.
We gave $100,000 to push it, sell the sport.
Well, this is true. We absolutely did. And it's a passion that my CEO has to help educate young people. He does so many things at the personal level that he and his wife are engaged in the Chicago community in particular. So we feel pretty proud about what we do, and we're just going to keep doing better.
Philip Reichen, president of Wheaton College. I want to make sure that the point of President Wiseman's question doesn't get missed, which is the sustainability that many of us involved in higher education in presidential roles that we're concerned about is just the entire mission of higher education. And I think the comments about the investment that colleges and universities can make in business through careful and wise choices in our procurement dollars, that's a great point from this conversation. But it's still, I think, a little bit in the conversation, what kinds of investment can business make in the sustainability of higher education? And, but it's not just business, it's also government. And this is partly a comment, but maybe there's a little bit of a question to it, wanting to thank Governor Quinn and others in the state legislature that support our monetary assistance program. Our institution, Wheaton College, is very different from St. Xavier. We're a national private liberal arts college, and you perhaps wouldn't think of us as a diverse institution, and yet 25% of our incoming freshman class this year was students of color. Many of those students from Illinois are dependent on their monetary assistance program, so we're grateful for that. If there's a little bit of a question, it's how can we advocate effectively, not just with the governor's office, but with the state legislature. Does anybody have any advice for us on the government side of investment in higher education?
We can't support MAC if we pretend like we have revenue that we don't have. And so out of Wheaton College, you have a state legislator there. Tell them not to pretend that we can cut billions of dollars from our budget and support Wheaton College and the other fine institutions within our state.
Thanks to the panelists. Want to add to that? No. Well, you talked about advocacy, so that may be a good point to end. I do hope you've learned as much as I have today and that we'll continue the discussion. Before we conclude, though, I do want to thank the Federation for their sponsorship. I want to thank Governor Pat Quinn. We really couldn't ask for a better leader and advocate for higher education.